work.
Oh, right. You know, if you figure this ARV thing works, how come not everybody's a millionaire? I keep asking.
That's a good question.
It really is. I can remote view. I can do everything. All right. Well then, like I said yesterday, Ingo's lost his briefing book. Well, you got a room full of psychics. Where find them? It's going to be a problem. Okay, I'm getting that tense now. Okay, lighten up, Marty. Rhetorical manner. Okay, we are now live. We're going to go ahead and have Marty, right here, the good guy Marty Rosenblatt. He's going to go ahead and talk about the Associative Remote Viewing, Precognition, ARV stuff, and some of his protocols and some of his theories. It's going to be rather interesting. Marty and I have had a few discussions through the course of this conference, and I think you're going to find him an able defender of his cause. I'll leave it to Marty. Thank you.
My cause. Am I live? Can you hear me? Okay, let's first get past that.
I'll take over that.
Are we going now? Oh, can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
Yes? Yes. Okay. ARV, Associative Remote Viewing, is an application. If I have a cause, just to pick up on what Ken said, it really is to educate and try to connect physics, which in my opinion has shown that remote viewing, telepathy, you've heard lots of different words for it in earlier speakers, is in fact a reality, part of our world. The mind has capabilities which are not now commonly accepted, but they're real. I believe physics has shown that. There's plenty of room for skepticism, but I've come to that conclusion. Intuition is what that capability is. I believe the time is now for applications. That is how society will be brought in to connect with this. So what I want to show you is a very specific application, and it is related to the stock market. So associative remote viewing, how do you go about doing that? Let's say you're interested in knowing if the market's going to go up or not up, down or neutral. What you might do is associate a photograph, and in fact earlier you've seen examples where you can associate objects. We associate photographs. So you might associate one photograph with the stock going up. You then would have another photograph if the stock goes down. You try to make these photographs different. You then would ask a remote viewer to describe a photograph he's going to see in the future. And then you would trade on this. Now this is clearly precognition, foretelling the future, because you're going to do this before the stock makes its move. So the viewer, in fact, the only information which he would have would be a target ID number. You can call it whatever you want to, but he will get coordinates and he will work with that. There will be a tasking associated with this, which is to move to the feedback session when he is going to see one or the other of these photos and to describe that photo. Now, we add this in a fashion which would allow a correct decision by the judge, because someone is going to take that description, that remote viewing summary transcript, and make a decision on which one of these two photos does it look like. A typical RV transcript, and remember, this comes first. The viewer who might provide something like this is totally blind, but a transcript, and I would have to say an excellent transcript, might be something like organic, though they're both organic, but organic, white, animal, multiple, cute, rectangular, hard. If you as a judge had that to judge, I think it's pretty clear that this would be the winner. you would take choice 1. This would happen before the start date of the stock. This might be a change in stock price between Monday and Friday, or Monday and Tuesday. You would have to have this done on Sunday, and then someone, in fact, could make a trade. Okay, now, think about associative remote viewing. It involves lots of elements, and each element has to fit together to make this a success. The judging is a key element, and it is the judge who ultimately makes the final decision. And often in transcripts, it's not clear what a judge should do. And that's true in remote viewing too. I couldn't help tell you about this one. This is a Dilbert cartoon. Ken the skeptic is saying, I alone know the contents of this envelope. And our intrepid remote viewer says it's a charcoal drawing of a woodchuck eating a small orange. Now the problem is you're letting your skeptic do the judging. So the skeptic says, nice try, you little fraud. But that's a long way from an ink drawing of a beaver eating a tangerine. Okay, now many remote viewers think they have judges like that, unfortunately, sometimes. But the point I want to make here is ARV is a very integrated process. The person who ultimately makes the decision is the judge, though. Now, it's the RVer's job to give such a clear session that the judge is right every time. And that's what ARVing is all about. So for those of you who did not know, that's what it's about. Now, our organization has done 5 protocols, and that's what I want to report on today. And then I want to tell you some of the things we've learned, and I'm going to close actually with some speculation that I'd, in fact, like some feedback on. The first protocols used an approach we called animal, vegetable, mineral, AVM. We set up 3 separate target pools, one which were primarily animals, one primarily vegetables, one primarily minerals, and we had 3 choices. In this case, the stock would move up, say, more than a point, down more than a point, or be what we call near neutral. So we were trying to decide how to trade based on 3 choices. And we had people make very fast decisions. In our original study, they would do 50 predictions a day. So they did not do full remote viewing sessions. Some of them, in fact, would use a pendulum. Some of them would guess. Some of them would use, the ones that were trained in remote viewing, make quick ideograms, which they had designed. And that was what we kept up basically in protocols 1, 2, and 3, where we reduced the number that they had to do each day, but we had 500 being the objective. In protocol 4, and this will become a little clearer in a moment, we introduced, because what we found is we were attracting remote viewers. The psychics who would just guess, the people who used pendulums experimented, and then for one reason or another they left. The remote viewers liked the fact that we had an online approach. They could do this online and get feedback, because the feedback is an integral part of this. And so the feedback we were getting as an organization led us to introduce independent judging and modify our technique. Originally, we started with an approach like this. We said, you come up any way you would like with an AV or M, given a ID number. You get to submit your predictions. You would then get feedback in a couple of days. We had a training program where we had feedback in minutes. We introduced the ability to have like a cool down statement. You could put a graphic, trying to make it online but comfortable. Here's where we introduced the ability to have a text box where you could put a summary text, and then we had a way an independent judge could look at the summary text and make a judgment, and the judge would then make the choice of AV or M. Now, do remember, in all of these there are investments associated with this. These are real live investments. In this case, a typical investment, this is an example very much like I said, up more than about a point, down more than a point, or neutral. And separate from the target IDs or investment IDs. What I want to show you first is results from 2 viewers. They actually did 750 predictions each. What we have here are their trials. So this is the trial scale. This is a percentile. Now, percentile is actually a pretty easy concept. But somehow people get confused by it. I mean, it's basically what percentage of people would do the same or worse than you strictly by chance. So 50% would be like the median. 90% says 90% of the people would get this kind of performance strictly by chance. So we're, of course, looking much better than chance. The 95% level is where scientists generally start getting interesting. They use terms like p equals 0.05, terms like that. So only 5% of the time would you, in fact, expect to get this result by chance. We like this because the viewers get feedback. I mean, there might very well have been something going on here. And we, in fact, think there was, because if you look at these two viewers, and we had 7 viewers on our first protocol, so this is our first protocol, 2 of them did extraordinarily well in their first 100 trials. Now, this is a 3-choice approach, so you would have expected 50 successes. They, in fact, both happened to get 47 successes at the 99.8 percentile. Only 0.2% of the time, by chance, would you expect anybody to do better than that. This is the first example I'm going to show you of beginner's luck. I think one thing which we've seen over and over again are quantitative examples of beginner's luck. So here are 2 people, which makes the probability of that actually much higher than this. Now, the other thing which we found, and which we were doing as investments, we had one investment keyed, and we would have our 7 viewers overlap not only with each other, but each viewer. For example, viewer 3 here would be doing 5 predictions on one investment target. Remember in protocol 1 they did 50? So they're actually doing 10 targets, 10 investment targets a day. So this viewer was doing 5. Each of these other were doing 5. So we really had 35 predictions associated with one investment target. So the concept is if we get a preponderance, that's the way we would invest. Here's a chart which shows what we call the investment target clustering. Again, it's a 3-choice approach. We had 35 options. In 2 cases, we found that these 7 viewers pointed in the same direction 20 out of the 35 times. Turns out 20 out of the 35 times to be pointed in the same direction has a percentile of 99.4, which means only 0.6% of the time would you expect that to do better than that by chance. That's pretty significant. So we would invest under those circumstances. In both cases, turned out that investment was correct. We got pretty excited about that. You know, you wait until you get a good consensus, you go forward. It turned out this was actually also very interesting because the same people, like here viewer 2 and 3, got 4 out of 5. In this case, they got 2 out of 5. There were other people that made the 20. So it was a real kind of group process. Very interesting. Well, that's the good news, very interesting. It turned out in protocols 2 and 3, did not happen again. We had cases where we got 20, as high as 21 out of 35. The equivalent very high percentiles, they were wrong. I see this as what I will call group beginner's luck. Same sort of phenomenon. They did very well at the beginning. We're still talking protocol 1 here. Okay. I want to jump now. Protocols, as you probably have already guessed, protocols 2, 3, and 4 were minor modifications and, if anything, didn't do as well as protocol 1. Here we are now, protocol 5. Protocol 5, we introduced new features which we think are important. One of them is we went from 3 choices to 2 choices. With 3 choices, it's just harder on the judging, and the judging process is so critical. So we went to 2 choices. Also, in the literature, there are a lot of people who were quite successful with 2 choices. We're looking for success. Why? We gave up worrying about a near neutral, and we went to up or not up, up or down. We also allowed both independent judging or self-judging. What we found is a lot of people don't mind judging on their own. There's some evidence that people who do that can do just as well as independent judging. That's still controversial, but some people believe that and in fact are doing that today. And then we really continued with a consensus approach, but we introduced the concept of groups. We now have groups involving 2, 3, 4, 5 people that will all work the same investment target. They now make the judgments of the final decision. So the final decision on whether to go in one direction or the other is made by the group themselves, and then we look at all the individual groups to get an overall consensus. So if you will, it's a consensus of consensuses. Now here, Protocol 5, these are the results. What we have here is a table from April to October 2001. For analyzing this data, and the way we looked at this data, because we're also looking at which groups might be more successful than others, is in what we call sets of 10. So these are sets of 10 investment predictions. And we were paying our people based on success. And we really paid for 8 out of 10, which is at this 95 percentile or so, 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 successes. This table shows less than 7 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, etc. So in April, we had a total of 7 groups, 7 sets of 10 that were completed. So that means there were really 70 investment predictions here. 2 were less than 7 out of 10. 1 was 7 out of 10. We actually got 4, which was 8 out of 10. You can just look at this and see that's actually pretty good because you expect higher numbers here. So this is the chart for each of the months. At the end, we had 78 get less than 7 out of 10, 7 do 7 out of 10, 9 get 8 out of 10, and we had 1 10 out of 10 with a total of 95. Now, the important things to notice here is that in April, our very first month, getting 4 sets, successes out of 7 sets, 4 successes out of 7 sets, the odds of that are 3,651 to 1. Decided to put it in that nomenclature. Exceptionally good. That kind of result's exceptionally good. We wish we could have kept that pace up, right? By the end of the study, we're down to 28 to 1. Again, 20 to 1, science begins to show an interest. So, I mean, this was, in the sense, if we wanted to, this is statistically significant. But I think what's even more important is that in our first month, we did extraordinarily well. And also, in our second month, one person, and this was the first time she had used this protocol. She was involved in some of the other protocols, but first time she used this protocol, she actually got a 10 out of 10. It took her several other sets of 10 until she got 8 out of 10. 2 more examples of beginner's luck. Okay, I'm going to get back to beginner's luck, but we did want, you've got all this data, we're doing this online, it's in the computer. It's obvious that we ought to look at the statistics of this. And so we looked at local sidereal time, which is, there's a fellow, and I'll show you his data in a minute, James Spottiswoode, who's looked at this, and he showed a correlation. But what local sidereal time is, in its simplest terms, it's kind of orientation with respect to the stars. So if you go out at the same local sidereal time, you will be in an environment where the stars are in the same place, whether you can see them or not, day or night. Okay? Now, James Spottiswoode showed this kind of effect. This is what's called effect size, which basically tries to take out the number of sample points he has and showing, quote, the effect. What is significant here is to look at the standard error, standard deviation, and the nature of the curve. His most significant effect, and the one in fact he's famous for, is that at 13.5 local sidereal time, he shows a very large effect size, which is maybe 3 or more standard deviations away from his mean effect size. It's very significant. Down here at 1800, he shows a negative effect, which is maybe 1.5, 2 standard deviations away. So we did the same sort of analysis. You can see the bottom line right here. The chart I'm about to show you fills up this space. His effect size overall, so the people he were using overall had an effect size of about 0.12. Our effect size was like 4 times lower, 0.03. Our mean is this dark curve, and here's our standard deviations, the 2 curves above and below. Bottom line, we cannot conclude anything. That's my conclusion. So we have not supported nor refuted what he's done. The other thing we looked at here was solar wind speed. And there was a hypothesis that solar wind speed, low solar wind speeds would give more of an effect size. But we see 1 standard deviation away from our mean here. I'm not prepared to conclude anything major from that at all. So I would say no conclusion. I wish I could stand up here and say something major in terms of a scientific sense. I cannot. What I would like to do is get back to beginner's luck. If anything, what's come out of our study is maybe a quantitative demonstration or quantitative examples, at least, of beginner's luck. How many of you believe in beginner's luck? Yeah, most people have experienced it, see other people do it. This is not like it's a new concept. This is not a new discovery. But what I do believe is important is to take it in. I mean, beginner's luck, believed in your gut, says it's a different world. That's a different paradigm. That means that you can get information from non-normal ways, at least under the conditions of a beginner. That's not what the skeptics would say, right? The current view is you can never beat the chance odds. They're what run the universe. So beginner's luck is really significant, in my opinion. And so I think you need to take it in. Often when you're doing things with intuition, I think it's quite valuable to take the position of a beginner. There's something about the mind when you're in a beginner's mode which in fact leads to success. So first I want to talk about some conventional wisdom, and then I want to give you conjecture, speculation. Conventional wisdom, which I think has a lot of value, nothing wrong with conventional wisdom, would say things like when you're beginning a new task, there are things like there's minimum psychological baggage. There's no fear of failure. There's no fear of success. I mean, first time you're doing it, I mean, you know, you got lots of easy reasons for not doing it right. Plus, if you do it right, hell, I'm lucky. I don't have to worry about becoming famous. Some people have a fear of success. I think we all know that. Those are not at play when you're a beginner. I think also the conscious mind is watching a lot of what would be considered superficial things because you're a beginner. What's going on? What do I have to write on the paper if you're learning to do remote viewing? If you're playing roulette or something, you know, the ball's going around, there's a lot of noise. The intuition is coming from the subconscious mind, and the conscious mind being focused on other things just sort of gets out of the way. And then also, when you're a beginner, it's just a lot of fun. You tend to be enjoying yourself. And I actually think those are part of what's going on, and setting up a mindset like that would in fact be valuable. But I would like now to put out a new concept, and it's certainly not entirely new. In fact, it may not even be new at all. It's hard to come up with anything new. But at least let me give you my take on what I want to call societal subconscious mind and how it might connect with beginner's luck. The fact that remote viewing, things like remote healing, we've heard of telepathy, all of this goes back, as you've heard in some of the other talks, for millennia. They have, in my opinion, demonstrated that we have connections with other minds. Mind-to-mind connection exists. And again, in this audience, how many of you agree? Right. So, accept that. I accept that. Let's go forward. The question, it seems to me, is when the subconscious mind is focused on a task, like a healing task, and the healer goes away, is the connection still there in some way, but maybe in a reduced fashion? Are the subconscious minds still connected? What do you think? What do you think? You think they're still connected? Yeah. Yeah, I hear a lot of yeses. Anybody feel that they're not, in some sense, maybe reduced, but in some sense, does it go to zero, the connection? Okay. And I think that's reasonable with the kind of worldview that we seem to be moving into. There's connections there. Well, what about somebody you've never met? You think there's a connection there? Is that harder for you? What's your intuition say? Person you've never met, do you think at the subconscious level that there's a connection between subconscious to subconscious mind? Okay, good. Well, that then, in my opinion, leads immediately to this societal subconscious mind, because that means that every one of us is connected to everyone else, and while it may be minor, the connection being there might very well also influence us. So now what the issue becomes is, what characteristics do you give this societal subconscious mind? Generally, for example, the collective unconscious, the characteristics that are given are very kind of historical. There's an archetypal image which is sort of out there, not particularly connected. Certainly very different than what you feel with remote healing, where there's a direct connection. The image which I'm beginning to play with is that this is a dynamic interface, that the societal subconscious mind can almost be looked as a mind that you might be able to interact with, that you in fact do interact with at the subconscious level. You know, I'm basically a scientist. It turns out this was not easy for me to put up here. And yet, my sense is that in this community, I'm almost telling you things which you already believe. But it's rather interesting, because the consequences of it, to me, seem so significant. Because if we interact with a societal subconscious mind, well, let's try to give some characteristics to this subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is put together from lots of people, and they have different magnitudes in terms of how they interact with us, how they interact with remote viewers. Well, maybe this societal subconscious mind provides resistance. You know, I still believe the individual has got the power, the ability. The source is with each individual. So free will, all those things still exist. None of this takes away from that. In fact, if anything, it's supportive of it, because you, in fact, are influencing everybody else to some level. The societal subconscious works both ways. But overall, if the society is aware, and one of the characteristics I would give our societal subconscious is precognition. The evidence for precognition is exceptionally good. As good as for remote viewing, remote healing. Clearly, the societal subconscious has precognition, has the ability to imagine what would happen if. So a societal subconscious might very well understand that precognition, remote viewing, remote healing, things of that sort, as fully developed, would change the worldview. We would be talking about a major paradigm change. A lot of the people at the individual level, who now would also be now connected from the societal subconscious to their personal subconscious to their conscious, all of that connection would be very negative. I mean, stockbrokers, people who just have our normal worldview. If the lottery were to be predicted 2 or 3 times in a row by remote viewers, the worldview would change. There would be, but it would change in a way that they would see as being negative. Now, this resistance comes at a level which is in what I like to think of as idea space. This is not done at the conscious level. There are ideas out there, and the subconscious is working in something called an idea space. Now, ideas never act in a vacuum. So ideas are connected to all other kinds of ideas. We are, if you look around, the idea that we are the center of the entire universe, and hey, that's kind of obvious, right? The moon goes around us, the sun goes around us. All those stars, when you go out at night, go around us. I mean, that was really a good paradigm, that the Earth is the center of the universe. And that's connected to lots of other things. Hey, people sew t-shirts, I'm the center of the universe, you know. It's a good idea. But there are other ideas, like what are those planets out there that are working in strange orbits? There was counter evidence. But those were resisted. It took a long time, and only with great difficulty, that these two, actually this idea, the idea that we were fixed in space, moved and connected up with evidence. And I see things like that happening potentially right now, where if you take society's ideas about the reality of precognition, what do they believe about it? Generally that it doesn't exist. I'd say that's generally what people would believe. Or maybe they wouldn't even believe that. Maybe what they would believe is, yes, it happens sometimes, because a lot of people really have experienced precognition, but I could never get my arms around it. I could never tap into it. I could never make a light bulb shine all the time. Yeah, electricity happens, and maybe you can come up with a gadget that'll do it sometimes, but you can't use precognition all the time, or you can't even use it 80% of the time, as opposed to chance saying you can get something right 50% of the time. I can't harness precognition to where it's right 80% of the time. That world would be a different world. So I think maybe that's where society is. It happens random, but you can't get your arms around it. Well, here we have now is public evidence. Notice I said public, because I do believe that the scientific evidence is rather clear that precognition exists. You go to the work of SRI, you go to the work of the Pear Group at Princeton, and it's rather conclusive that there's something going on. So that's the scientific evidence. That evidence is not out in the public in a way that they can understand or appreciate. And so right now, these two things are very disjoint. And it's going to be applications, in my opinion, that are going to cause this flip. the societal subconscious mind, having this concept, giving it a reality, and most of you have said you accept it. I ask, so, okay, yeah. Well, what this means is that you can, in fact, consider communicating with it, allowing it to communicate with you at a subconscious level. I mean, remote viewing is an example of where you tap into your subconscious. Meditation would allow you to tap into your subconscious. And I think that having this point of view can, in fact, be helpful, because you can come from a place when you do your remote viewing work, your remote healing work, where really this is going to benefit society. I mean, coming closer to reality has always, in the long run, turned out to be a benefit. Sometimes the transition periods are a little tough, but we are better off because we view the universe the way we do now as opposed to the way we did hundreds of years ago. And I think one of the things which you need to do when you communicate with the societal sub is remove fear, because I think a lot of what stops us from getting to the truth faster is fear of change from the way people are now. Though in some ways, I have to acknowledge that the new world you're moving into, to a lot of people, in a way which you can understand, raises fear. My whole belief system has to change. I can't do the same job I did. Hey, medical science at a subconscious level, they would never say this consciously, but at a subconscious level, might very well be afraid of remote healing. I mean, what's that going to do to their way of looking at the world? And so a lot of that sort of thing could go on at the subconscious level and at the societal subconscious level. Okay, what about benefits? I say we should dialogue on benefits. And I specifically want to talk about the stock market, because everyone always says, what are the, you're doing the stock market, there's a lot of resistance in some people's minds, like it's the worst thing in the world to try to make money using the skill of remote viewing. This is to be used only for good. And certainly that belief would stop people from doing this. And I do believe that these skills should in fact only be used for good. But what I want to show you is that, in my opinion, using it to earn money is not necessarily bad. In fact, it's a good thing. Doctors earn money. Lawyers earn money because they're professionals. So if you using a natural skill, remote viewing is a natural skill. If you're a remote healer, any kind of healer, that's a natural skill. You should get paid for it. The consequences to society, in my opinion, of remote viewing stock and commodity markets, financial markets, which take advantage of, say, large oscillations, because that's where, in fact, you can make the money, would be to bring stability to those markets. Those markets would tend to go stably to kind of a true value. The instabilities would provide opportunities, absolutely, for people who had the skills to sense that. Nothing wrong with that. You're then going to go to a more stable kind of market. No, please, I'd like at this point, I'm nearly done. I would very much like at this point to enter into some dialogue. So, do you have something you'd like to share?
Somebody laughed next door. There's a gentleman back there.
Okay.
I think that idea is a correct example on October 1987. Computers kicked the market into a tailspin. That's because they all said sell. Now, if you had ARV playing and it's picking up sell, you're going to have the same thing occur. It's only in the individual level that you're going to make any money in ARV. If you get a mass ARV picking effect, you're going to have the same thing occur with the computer.
If If all ARVers were at the same skill level, and that happened tomorrow, I would agree with you. What's important to remember is there's a process of transition here. By the time all the ARVers get as good as you've just assumed, we'll be stable already. Because what's going to happen, I believe, is as ARV and people get better and better at this, and Ingo is saying 30 years, and I'm not going to disagree with Ingo, as people get better and better over time, the ones that get better will start being successful. Hopefully others will learn and get more successful. They're not going to dominate a market. If they begin to dominate a market, the market goes stable because there was no reason to have the instability occur. Now, well, that's my view. But I think what's wrong with your argument, and I accept what you said to me, what's wrong with your argument is you're imagining it happens all at once. It'll happen over time. And I think over time the markets will become more and more stable. Because there'll be less and less, quote, to earn from them. And what you will begin looking at are other things which are unstable. But ARV is good for looking at instabilities. In fact, the other application, which I want to point out to you here, would be earthquakes, natural disasters. Natural disasters are an excellent way of using remote viewing, associative remote viewing. Wouldn't it be great if we could move to a place where society accepted, and this will only happen after these predictions are shown to be reliable, obviously. We're not ready now. But if within 30 years, people could predict earthquakes which would be occurring a month in advance so that people would, quietly leave. Take what they needed and, with them. That would be a rather beneficial use of remote viewing, associative remote viewing. Floods, droughts, the applications of this are rather tremendous. Changes our world in ways which in fact are beneficial. What I see is as the challenge is developing a working relationship with society at both the conscious and the subconscious levels. That's kind of the challenge for each of us, especially those of us that are working in remote viewing in areas like that where we actually actively use our subconscious. And we need to just build up a positive working relationship at both the conscious and subconscious levels. Thank you. Okay, yeah.
I've got the microphone here for questions
Okay.
and such like that. I am in control. I like that.
I'm just curious as who benefits and who would be hurt by the stock market being more stable? I mean, in a large sense, is it, what would the resistance be? I mean, would somebody be losing out if it would be stable?
Well, there's a whole community, a financial community of people who invest based on what they see as being price movements. That's one level, speculators, people like that. But it really goes much deeper than that. There are people who worry about, are new companies going to be successful or not? I don't know how that's going to play out in, let's use 30 years as a time frame, in the next 30 years. I mean, imagine having knowledge about what's going to be successful in terms of a given area to pursue. The people who have that knowledge and use it, I guess, will start putting their money there. Maybe it won't, maybe there will be no, I'm not sure there will be any losers. I think the game is going to change. The people who are entrepreneurs can still be entrepreneurs. What they have to do is get a hold of the best remote viewers. Maybe that's going to be part of the game. The people who are doing that,
Okay, we'll take another question here.
Carl Young found a similar thing in relation to the excitement and interest. The psychic effect was maximized, and when that interest died, the effects died out as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Well, you got another one? Come on.
This is a process question. If you're using the same remote viewers day after day, then do you change the symbol? Remember the bear and the avocado? Then the second day, do you change the two symbols for yes and no, high and low each time? Or, I mean, you know, like
Yeah.
after a week, they go, oh, bear, avocado.
No, we have a large pool of pre-selected pairs. And though what's interesting is some of our viewers are actually experimenting with what you indicated. They seem so drawn to certain targets that they have chosen their own pairs and have 10 that they want to work with. And we're experimenting with that right now. So most people, though, want brand new pairs.
Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions. If you have a question, you can come on back here. I'm trying to get somewhere.
Yes, organized markets are basically a product of Western civilization as opposed to Eastern civilization. And I mean that in the stock markets and commodity markets that you have studied. So my question is, when you say that, when you describe the benefits of precognition to society, are you, cross-culturally, there'll be different beliefs, and the markets respond internationally, or interculturally, not necessarily within the culture. So how would you address those issues?
Long question.
Yeah, but the intercultural question is a great one, and I don't know the answer to that. I mean, the fact of the matter is the primary financial markets in our society, world society today, are pretty much what you see here. I mean, they're guided by money. I think the people who make the decisions in the Eastern world are far less percentage of the population, if you know what I mean. I think there are less entrepreneurs. There are less people that invest in those markets. And so they may very well be changed less than in our U.S. society.
The challenge is to develop a working relationship with society. And what are some things that we can do? Do you have any ideas or solutions for this?
I briefly addressed that, and I wish I had more, and I would love suggestions. And if people go to my website, I'd love you to email me on that. I think what you have to do, oh, you had one? Okay, but I think what you have to do is address it on a subconscious level.
Well, you and I talked about this, is that you have, in my opinion here, you have the serious people that are interested in this, but then, as you heard me refer to it before in the past, the tinfoil hat crowd.
Yeah.
Okay, this is how you're going to have to figure out a way to approach, and I said this in my original briefing, how do you represent yourself to the public? Are you credible and professional and educated?
Right.
Or are you just going to stand there wearing a Star Trek uniform and start preaching using the Force Luke? I mean, you got to establish some sort of adult relationship with society. I'm not saying that you all aren't adults, and Aaron Gordon knows you all are very well organized people. But this is something you're going to definitely have to deal with, coming from a guy who's an outsider.
At the conscious level, that's right, and then I think we also need to do subconscious work.
Okay, next question?
You stated that you use up to 3 choices in your targets for associative remote viewing. Have you tried anything larger than that, like say a 5-horse race or a 10-horse race or something?
We haven't, but others certainly have. In fact, at SRI, I believe their standard pool was 9 sites, and the judges would actually take a transcript and go to one of 9 sites, and they would have to say which of those 9 sites match the transcript more. But we personally have not at our organization. The most we've done is 3.
We have to move to the next question.
To do with local sidereal time.
Yes.
Spottiswoode presumably was using the local time when the viewer viewed. You are asking your viewers to view something in the future. Did you adjust the local sidereal time for the time when the viewing was desired, if you follow me?
I
Big
do.
difference, okay? Same local time is going to be a different local sidereal time tomorrow.
We thought about that. What we used was the time when the remote viewer did the session and converted that to local sidereal time. We have looked at the data, but only briefly, at what we call the feedback time, which is close to what you're talking about. I haven't done the statistics yet, I just didn't have time, but I will, and that is one of the complications with precognition, because just as you're pointing out, there are several times to consider.
Yes. Thank you very much, Marty. And as soon as I start seeing millionaires popping out that are able to predict this kind of stuff, then maybe I might flow a little bit more onto the believer side. But that goes back to our original.
Kent, our resident skeptic.
That's
we need
right.
one.
That's me, and I'm running this show here.
Someday, man may walk on the moon.
Yeah, someday. And he's all in black and he wears these dark shades, so you know where he's coming from. Okay, that's it for this session right here. If you have further questions, go ahead and talk to Marty. He'd be happy to answer your questions out.